Good morning. This is Avraham Shira for Nar Shalom and Habura. Welcome. It's Yom Shishi, Friday, getting ready for Shabbat, but it's the best time really to get ready by learning Torah, especially the Torah of Rebbe Nachman. And the Torah on Shabbat we have this morning is, I think, unique. It's going to touch on a lot of issues that I think will be helpful to help us have a greater Shabbat, and learn a few things that we might not have heard before. So this is Torah Yud Zayin in Tinyana, the second section of Likutei Moharan. And we begin with Tzarich lezeher ma'od li'ot sameach v'tov lev b'Shabbat. A person needs to be careful, very careful, to be happy and have a good heart on Shabbat. So the first thing that statement says is that we have to be careful. That simcha is not this commodity that you go out and buy. It's this commodity that you work for, that you're careful with, to be happy and have a good heart. Now, a good heart means you accept things the way they are. It doesn't mean we don't want to change things and make them better. We don't fight. We don't fight things. A good heart means I receive from the world around me before I make judgments. Ki malot kedushat Shabbat gedula v'yikra me'od. The great level of the holiness of Shabbat is very precious. Kamuva, as is brought, Befrat in Reshit Chochma, the Rav brings down over there from Rav Eliyahu Davidas, who was a great Hacham who was buried in Hebron, actually, and he's famous for the book Reshit Chochma, and it's a wonderful sefer, famous and very, very full of advice. And he says it's very fitting to learn this book and the Shar, the gate that deals with Shabbat. He should put his heart very closely to what's being said about the great holiness of Shabbat. In other words, Shabbat is holy unto itself. It's an entity, it's a thing, it's a reality in time and space called Shabbat. And it's holy. Now, our job is to receive it, right? Our job is to enter Shabbat, to enter the holiness and the joy of Shabbat. So it's not about me, right? It's about Shabbat. This is a very important distinction, because when I start worrying about my simcha and my joy and my love, and I'm closing the doors, right? That the true opening is to understand that these things exist and they are real in the world, and all I have to do is attach to them. I don't have to find joy. I have to feel the joy that is. You hear that? It's a big difference. Very important distinction. We'll talk about it more as we go. Okay. Ki yesh sham kama dvarim pratiim ikarim b'shkrushat ma'alot Shabbat. There are many precious, important things over there that the Rav says in Reshit Chochma about Shabbat. Ki kol inu ma'alot ne'emar al sham al Shabbat hu davar b'fnei atzmo. Each thing is a thing before itself, and we should understand it very well. Kedei sheyitlahev libo lekabel Shabbat b'simcha gedola v'atzuma k'ra'ui. In order to be enthusiastic, to be aroused in the heart, to receive Shabbat with joy, awesome, great joy, as is fitting. So again, it's this idea that to receive Shabbat properly, I have to be in joy. I can't look and hope, okay, I'll feel better on Shabbat. You can, but the Rav is saying is that we need to build our enthusiasm for Shabbat before Shabbat. Okay? When we build that enthusiasm on Friday, which is like the hardest day, right? Everybody's working and shopping and cleaning and cooking and organizing. It gets a little hard to be so happy when we're working so hard. That's a great one. If you can be happy and work hard, then you're on the level. But anyways, the work here is to generate the joy before Shabbat, so that my Shabbat receives the Shabbat, that I have joy makes me a vessel to receive the higher joy of Shabbat. That if I'm not happy, Shabbat will help me. But if I go into Shabbat happy, I'm going to receive a much greater portion of that joy. Now he says, he goes on to say, by having this enthusiasm and simcha and receiving Shabbat, a person's awe reaches wholeness, which is another thing you never hear anybody say, except Rebbe Nachman, that your awe, which is from the side of yira, which is from the side of fear and pachad, is actually reaches its completion through joy. And he goes further to tell us that's in our das, our knowledge. Now listen closely. Because on the weekdays, it's possible that our awe of Hashem will have a little foolishness with it. Now, here kesilut is not like cute foolishness. It's a klipa. It's a negative force. Okay? So, during the weekday, there's this state of joy. There's a state of yirah. There's a state of ahava. But all of them are less than Shabbat. That's the 6 work days. That's part of the curse of Adam. That every 6 days we have to work. And then on the 7th day we rest and enjoy what we've done, hopefully. But during the weekdays there's this kesilut, and it means foolishness, but I want to leap out a little bit and translate kesilut as religiosis. What I define as religiosis is when people take religion the wrong way and they actually ruin their experience of Hashem by doing so. We'll see how this goes. Because this foolishness is not a simple thing. It's a thing that will actually cause us to fall. And especially during the weekday, because during the weekday, all the negative forces are coming close. And they're challenging us in different ways. On Shabbat, we have a vacation from all the negative forces. On Shabbat, we have this kedusha. It's like a force field that separates us from the negativity that's out there. It doesn't mean the negativity doesn't exist. It's just not close to me because I'm in Shabbat. Okay. And he brings a pasuk, Halo yiratcha kisilatecha. And even in Eov, we've talked about him before, Job was very stark guy. And he said, Halo, your fear, your awe is your foolishness. In other words, there's this level where fear becomes foolishness. Your awe of God is actually foolish. And that's really what, so far from what I've heard from the Rebbe, is the best definition for what I call religiosis. That I want to be in awe of God, but my awe of God is not fixed or pure, and so it leads me to do foolish things. I've seen guys wash their hands 20 times. And you say, oh, that's Avraham, that's not religiosis, that's OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder, washing the hands. But why do I see it in yeshiva? Why do I see it by guys that have been learning their whole life? What's going on? Okay, something's broken inside them, something hurts inside them, they've been wounded. We accept that as a reality, and we have to work with it. But when I take my brokenness and I put it into religion, it can be very dangerous. Okay, and that's the Rebbe's touching on that here, that your awe, you think you're full of awe of God, and it's actually got a little bit of foolishness in there that makes people, insult their family because their family's less religious than them. I know people that go back to America from Israel and they tell their mother, I can't eat in your kitchen anymore. Oh, I'm holy. I'm sorry. But it's true. Now maybe you can't. Maybe moms and dad are still eating pork, and you're about tshuva and you want to keep the Torah and you don't want to eat pork. But it doesn't mean you insult your parents because they're eating pork. There's gentle, subtle ways to handle these things. But if you handle it hardcore, I'm the man, I know what the halacha is and the law is that I can't even step in your house because you eat pig. That's ridiculous. That's religiosis. That's taking the yira and adding the foolishness. That's what Eov said. Halo yiratecha kislatecha. And this is a phrase that we got to remember because it's dangerous. It happens. And I'm sure all of us have examples. I've seen many things like this, and it's kind of sad. And people's feelings get hurt for no reason. I know people that their parents offered them money, and they said, "No, I can't take your money. It's not holy money." And the parents are just insulted. They think their kids are crazy. The Torah is not here to make us crazy. The Torah is here to make us aligned and yashar, straight and true and kind and loving and with awe, but not foolishness. We don't take the awe to the level of hurting other people's feelings. We respect where people are at. V'ikar kisilutu mechamat, and he tells us, very interesting, Rabbi Nachman says that the essential aspect of this foolishness that I'm translating as religiosis, hu mechamat ashibud sheyesh b'chol. It's because of the enslavement of the weekday. Now, what is the enslavement of the weekday? Well, we all have jobs. We all have to do things. We have to show up. We have to perform. We have to give what we can give to other people. But the weekday, the Rebbe calls enslavement. In other words, because part of me is not free. I'm not free during the weekday to do what I want when I want. As much as like Shabbat, nobody's calling me to work. Nobody's, texting that they need something on Shabbat. It's a day of freedom from all our technology, freedom from all the less important communications, shall we say, that we see some places and some platforms, right? That the weekday, we are vulnerable. We can be hit by 1,000 needs in 1,000 minutes, right? Someone's going to call you for this and for this and for this and for this, and it's your boss and it's your wife and it's your husband and it's your kids and it's your grandparents and it's it's endless needs. But when you're in Shabbat, you enter a zone of protection. And that's the Kedusha of Shabbat. But during the week, it's called She'ibud. It's called this lack of freedom, which we called enslavement. But nonetheless, the foolishness derives out of that. Okay? Ki ayidei ashibud ein adat shalem, because by this enslavement of the weekday, our das, our consciousness is not complete. And we've defined das many times. We understand its knowledge, its awareness, its presence, its consciousness. But not only that, during the week, though, it's not complete, right? And he says, Kamosh Katuv, as it's brought, Shanan Moav Minorav, it talks about Moav as a tribe. These guys were the floaters. Shanan means he's a floater. He's not too dedicated. He's not too committed. He'll show up for work once in a while, and and he'll smoke enough cigarettes during his break, and sit on his phone. These are Shananim, and it's not a positive thing. But it's going into the Gola. The leaving Eretz Yisrael is the idea also of leaving Shabbat. Now, of course, we have weekdays in Eretz Yisrael, but it's still a step down in the Kedusha. And the Gola is also this idea of the She'ibud of the weekday. But because Moab didn't go further into the exile, he still retained his reason. As the rabbis teach elsewhere, ki al yedei she'ibud galut, through the enslavement and the exile of the das, a person is confused. So let's say I wake up in the morning and I don't know what to do. Should I go daven? Should I take a shower? Should I go to the mikveh? Should I brush my teeth? What do I do? I don't know what to do. That's already called bilbul. When you know what to do, moment by moment by moment, you're out of bilbul. This is all I can do right now is get up, wash my hands, say a blessing, put on tefillin. The minute I don't know what to do, that's bilbul. And that's what the Rebbe equates that to the das of the weekday. All week long, people are coming at us to tell us what to do and to ask us things. And that's all what we're here for during the weekday. But Shabbat, the idea is that we leave this confusion. We leave this unknown factor. What's going to be next? What do I do next? Where do I go? Who's calling? Why are they calling? What's the problem? Endless. We don't need it. But rather, Shabbat is the rest from this confusion. We know what to do on Shabbat. You get up, you make a coffee, you say good morning to your family, you make blessings, you go to synagogue, you have a wonderful time meditating and praying with Hashem, and you go to Kiddush and see your friends that you don't get to see all week long, and you share with them a little bit, and you make a l'chaim, and your heart is open, and you're in Shabbat. There's nobody out there to mibalbel otcha. So it's really, Shabbat is such a great gift because it's giving us a vacation from this world. All right. Aval b'Shabbat cherut. On Shabbat we have this, what the Rebbe calls freedom. Kishesh cherut ve'en shibud b'galut. On Shabbat there is no exile and there is no enslavement. It's called freedom. V'azaya dat shalem. And then when you are free, your dot is whole and you're not in confusion. Your mind is complete for your level at that time. V'azaya dat shalem. A dat shalem is a very big phrase, and it's not something that you can just translate for a few words and figure you got it. No. Dat shalem is the idea of total awareness of yourself, of the world around you, and being whole with the oneness of God and whole with the multiplicity of creation. The two of them together. Okay? That you have this dat shalem, that you see the big picture and the little picture all on the same screen. And when you do that, that's another idea for dat shalem, and that's what you get the gift of Shabbat. And he goes on, V'ikar cherut, and the essential aspect of freedom, al yedei ta'anug v'simcha shel Shabbat, through our pleasure and the joy of keeping Shabbat, b'chinat az ta'anug al Hashem, and then we're going to have, our joy is going to be straight from Hashem. We're not going to have this, incidental joy. I'm happy because I got paid, or I'm happy because my wife likes me, or I'm happy because, my kids did well in school. No, those are all good reasons to be happy, but they're not the highest reason. They're not the highest joy of to be happy because of the presence of Hashem. And Shabbat is the access point of that. Is that presence of Hashem that gives you a much more refined joy. It's a joy that other things can't bother. Okay? And then we become free. He takes the famous pasuk that you will go out from exile in freedom. It applies to the Jewish people leaving Egypt, which of course is coming up soon to a calendar near you in the Jewish year that we have Pesach coming up, of course. And it tells you you're going to go out in joy, but you could break the phrase down as besimcha tetzu, that in joy you will go out, but if you don't have joy, you're not going out of freedom. So this is kind of heavy-duty thing. How about people that just aren't happy? They're upset, they're hurt, they have reasons to be depressed. Well, you know what? Hashem says, I'm sorry, I know you're unhappy, I know you're sad, I know life is hard. I made life hard. It's true. But it doesn't abscond me from the responsibility for finding the joy, for seeking the joy, and looking for it. So, this idea of joy on Shabbat is our responsibility. Now, people don't like this too much. As a therapist, I could tell you, you tell somebody, be happy, they're gonna scream and run out of the office. What do you mean be happy? I can't be happy. My wife left me, I lost my job, I don't have a place to live. Okay, those are all great reasons not to be happy. It's true. No one's going to take that from you. God, but God is saying, you're made in my image and you have the power of choice. And you can choose joy even in the greatest darkness. Like King David says, I went down to hell and there you are. I thought I got to go to heaven to find God. I can find God in hell. And right now, this life feels like hell for a lot of people that are suffering. But the Rebbe says, no, we got to take a little responsibility for the joy, knowing that if I could just find some joy, I can get out of here. Because joy is the element that takes us into freedom. If you say, I'm free, and you're not happy, you're not free. And if you say, I'm happy, then I think you got a little bit of freedom over there. But when there is freedom, adat b'shlemut, when you have freedom, your dot is whole. Another way of measuring your dot is how free am I from the external world? How free am I from worrying about my rent, or worrying about my boss, or what how they looked at me at the counter? Anything can bother us, believe me, right? That will measure how shalem my dot is. And then our awe is whole. Our awe is complete, is fitting, because we've had this joy that took us into freedom. And then I can really fear Hashem. Now he goes on the Rebbe takes us to another level. He says, Bechinat Yirei Shabbat. The Tikkuni Zohar, which is a tremendous work, and it's really quite easy Hebrew and Aramaic, but it's very hard. The concepts are very high. It's highly recommended. So it takes the 70 permutations of the word Breshit. Breshit can be combined in many different ways, all the different levels of the word Breshit. And each way you combine the letters is a different meaning. And here, the Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai takes Breshit and turns it into the words Yirei Shabbat, the awe of Shabbat. Now you could say awe of Shabbat, mean I'm in awe of Shabbat, is such a great thing. Or it's the awe that you feel for all of life because it's Shabbat. And because you have this protection around you. Because then on Shabbat, our awe doesn't have this foolishness that we talked about before. This exaggerations. These fanatical expressions that are not really part of the Torah. And people do things, people throw rocks on Shabbat because they think they're being righteous. What's that? That's the foolishness. That's religiosis. Okay? You're throwing rocks at people because they're driving their car on the Shabbat. Well, where were you when where were you when God created those people? Thank God it's not happening like it used to 20 years ago. But we see these kinds of examples everywhere. It's all this foolishness of yirah, right? Yiratecha kisilatecha. And it's a scary phrase when you understand how easily a person can take his love and awe of God and go too far. And that's not what we're here for. Okay, and Yirei Shabbat, the awe of Shabbat, ki aza yirah bli ksilut, because then our awe is without this foolishness, like it does have during the week. Ki sheyesh yimei achol. Ki gar ksilut mechamat shibud. And again, he goes back to the idea we just had, that the main reason for the foolishness in the first place is that we are enslaved. Now, if you go to some people and say, you're enslaved, they're going to say, what are you talking about? I'm religious. I'm holy. I do everything. My holy wife just came to listen a little bit. Welcome. And if you tell somebody you're not free, they're going to say, you don't know what you're talking about. They're going to start debating you about their freedom. But, it's like when I see people that are unhappy and I say, wow, you look so unhappy. Oh, no, I'm not unhappy. They immediately defend their not being happy. They're being happy. If you're happy, you don't need to defend it, right? So this is that foolishness of the weekday that Shabbat takes out for us. It purifies us. And through this, we elevate all the fallen fears by this breaking the foolishness of the weekday on Shabbat. And the Rebbe calls fallen fears like fearing a politician, or fearing a minister from the government, or fearing a police officer, or fearing your teacher, or fearing your spouse. Fearing anything that's not God is called fallen fear. Okay, but we fix that on Shabbat. Ki al yedei hadat merimim otan. Because when you have das, and you have, remember, how do we get das? We get das through joy. The joy completes the das. Okay, so joy is really the switch here. It gives you a new mindset. And that lifts it up for Shabbat. And the Rebbe repeats, and the essential knowledge and awareness on Shabbat is through joy. So joy is really the measure of where you're holding in a lot of ways. And we have to be honest with ourselves. If you don't want to be honest with everybody else in the world, fine. You want to fake like you're happy? Go ahead, try. You want to fake like you have awe of God? Try. If you want to fake like you have love of people, that's still good, because fake love is still good love compared to no love, right? However, the Rebbe is telling us that joy is the measure. It's the measure of your yirah and shlemut and your dat. And then again, through that joy, we come to this level of freedom. You know, the whole world is screaming about freedom. All the world, every nation screams about freedom. Freedom from what? Freedom from oppression, freedom from ignorance, freedom from racism, freedom from aggression. They're all true. But why is nobody talking about freedom in the mind from the exile, freedom in the mind from the curses of Adam that make us have to work 6 days a week, and sometimes we don't want to? So this is a challenge for every person, no matter what level they're at. If you're a billionaire, it's still a challenge. You might think I got $1 billion. I can do anything I want, whenever I want, however I want. I can tell the world what to do and they'll listen. But that's a delusion of money, right? And don't think that money's going to give you shlemut hadat and simcha. It'll help. Money helps. It for sure helps. But it's still not going to take you to the level we want to go to, this level of the simcha of Shabbat. Because you can't use money on Shabbat. So if you're a billionaire, on Shabbat you have nothing. Okay, you bought some more food than other people to put on your table, but it doesn't make you truly joyous. Now, if you have joy in giving to people, that's going to be another level. And so Shabbat is also about this time of giving, the time of inviting people over, of sharing the gifts that God has given you each week with other people that might have less. We get to the freedom, and then our knowledge, our awareness is complete. So this is a process. There's a lot of factors involved here, but we have to just remember the first important thing is that joy is the switch, the turn on Shabbat. And I want to receive the higher joy of Shabbat. I need to turn on my lower joy. I have to first become a little happy inside with what I have, that I have a wonderful life. And if I don't feel happy about it, it's my problem. It's not God's problem. It's not my wife's problem. It's my problem. If I don't feel happy that I have all the great things around me, then how am I going to go into the simcha of Shabbat? So I bless everyone to have this pre-Shabbat simcha, to work on these things and to find that place of gratitude and love and joy inside our hearts before Shabbat, and then to take on Shabbat with that greater awareness that we're going to get help now on Shabbat. We're going to feel joy, and we're going to be free from things like, oh, I got to eat that whole pizza. You know, how could I leave over those extra chicken wings in the pot? You know, and eat with excess. No, on Shabbat we don't have excess. There is, but it's not the same because it's purified. So I want to bless everybody to have this joy and to take the joy into your true freedom, and then you won't be afraid of anybody in your life. And then that's real freedom. So God willing, we'll see you next week from Nar Shalom. And next week is the last week before Rosh Chodesh Nisan, the beginning of the cycle for Pesach. Rosh Chodesh Nisan is the birthday of Rabbi Nachman, which is also the day of the crowning of kings. During the whole 430-year period where we had a Beit HaMikdash and we had kings in Israel, the kings would be crowned and anointed, and the oil was poured on their head, and like the ancients did on the 1st of Nisan, which is coming up this week. So we look forward to being with you again, and have a great Shabbat. And give yourself some break, give yourself some freedom, turn off the phones, turn off the TVs, and just be with yourself and see how that is, because that's where you'll find Hashem. God bless. Shabbat Shalom.